The time it happened, no one at Dynex Solutions had any idea their new hire wasn't just another mid-level logistics associate, but the CEO of the entire corporation. No one noticed anything strange when a tall man in a slightly oversized polo shirt and beat-up sneakers reported for his first shift in the basement warehouse. He clocked in late, mumbled when spoken to, and seemed a little too interested in things most employees ignored. Cracked pipes, locked rooms, and faces that turned away too fast. It should have been a normal week, but something about that week would crack the company open like a rotting shell. His name tag read Graham, and he claimed to be from a satellite office in Ohio. No one asked too many questions. That was the first red flag. What happened during those days can't be explained by logic alone. The employees on the warehouse floor had always whispered about strange schedules, disappearing temps, and late-night trucks that arrived empty and left full. The security guards all looked ex-military, but not in a comforting way. One of them flinched when Graham mentioned Homeland Security. Another one accidentally let slip a phrase, classified manifest, then refused to make eye contact for the rest of the day. Graham, or rather, Marcus Ellison, CEO of Dynex, took note of everything. He'd grown suspicious after his executive assistant found discrepancies in shipping reports. Nearly $12 million in off-book inventory routed through this very warehouse, yet the official logs showed only a fraction of that number. When the internal audit team claimed it was a rounding error, Marcus decided to go dark. He shaved his beard, ditched the Rolex, and built a new identity. No boardrooms, no chauffeurs. Just a fake resume, a new name, and a cold determination to catch whoever was bleeding his company dry. What he didn't expect was the silence. Everyone acted just a little too normal. But underneath the surface, something was very wrong. Employees would suddenly fall quiet when the supervisor walked by. Break room cameras always faced the floor, and no one dared speak above a whisper near the loading docks. It wasn't fear of getting fired, it was something else, something darker. On his third day, Marcus noticed a man, tall, built like a linebacker, with a voice like gravel, lingering near the cold storage room. He wore a blue cap with no logo, and every time Marcus tried to follow him, the man vanished around a corner or slipped into staff-only areas with security clearance well above a normal employee's level. Then there was the woman in HR who insisted Marcus hadn't submitted his onboarding paperwork, even though he watched her process it with his own eyes. Files seemed to disappear just like products did. And then, someone left a note in his locker. 4 words, scrawled in red marker. "You're not fooling anyone." That night, he drove home in silence, heart pounding, mind racing. He'd built Dynex from the ground up. His name was on the glass wall of the 32nd floor. But now, someone inside his own company was playing God, rerouting assets, faking identities, and running what looked dangerously close to a full-blown black market ring. The next morning, he showed up earlier than usual and stationed himself near the gate where trucks offloaded shipments. At 4:47 a.m., a blacked-out van pulled in. No license plate, no driver ID. 4 men got out, scanned a badge at the rear security gate, and began unloading boxes marked biomedical supplies. Marcus stepped forward, clipboard in hand, pretending to check manifests. One of the men locked eyes with him. Something in that look said, "Walk away or else." Later that day, Marcus confronted a senior floor manager named Redfield, a wiry man with a twitchy smile and sunglasses he never removed indoors. Marcus asked about the van. Redfield shrugged and said, "Special delivery. Needs to know basis." When Marcus pressed further, Redfield simply smiled wider and said, "Graham, you ask too many questions." That night, Marcus's apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, just rearranged. His toothbrush was upside down. The closet light was on. A single photo from his drawer, a family picture, was left in the middle of the kitchen table, face down. A message. Still, he refused to stop. The next day, a janitor whispered to him, Third floor, storage B7. Midnight, come alone. Marcus didn't even ask questions. He waited until the last crew left and snuck up the stairwell. The third floor was supposed to be closed for renovation. But as he crept down the hall, the fluorescent lights flickering above, he saw the sign for storage B7 crooked on the door. The lock was broken. Inside, it smelled of bleach and metal. Stacks of tablets and phones sat beside boxes labeled non-inventory. In the far corner, rows of laptops stripped of serial numbers, government tags removed. He pulled out his phone to record, but froze when he heard the voice. "You were told to stop digging, Marcus." He turned slowly. Redfield stood there, sunglasses off now, revealing one badly scarred eye. Two of the black van men were behind him. One had brass knuckles, the other a stun baton. Marcus stepped back, but there was nowhere to go. "This isn't your company anymore," Redfield sneered. "You handed it over the moment you got too rich to care about the details." Marcus lunged for the door. A flash of pain lit up his side. Something struck his ribs, hard. He crumpled but kicked backward, hitting one of them in the shin. He scrambled out, leaving his phone behind. He didn't stop until he hit the street, bleeding, shaking, angry. Back in his penthouse, one no one in the warehouse knew existed, he opened his safe. Inside were two things: a file marked Project Keelhaul and a backup hard drive containing every boardroom meeting for the last 3 years. He clicked through hours of footage, searching for a pattern. Then he found it. Redfield wasn't just some low-level floor manager. He'd been at Dynex under 6 different names. Photos from previous years showed him standing beside shipments, always near the top executives, always in the shadows. And worse, Redfield had once been on Dynex's terminated list, fired 7 years ago for misconduct, blacklisted from rehire. Yet somehow, here he was, back on the inside, running a phantom operation under the company's own roof. Marcus couldn't trust anyone at the top. The CFO's signature had appeared on one of the falsified shipping invoices. The head of logistics had recently purchased a $4.2 million home in cash. The rot went deep. He needed help. He called someone he hadn't spoken to in years, Mila Hastings, a former investigative journalist turned cyber forensics analyst. She owed him a favor. When she picked up, he said only, "I need you. Now." They met at a parking garage 2 hours later. Mila scanned the hard drive and froze. "This isn't just theft," she said. "These product codes are encrypted military stock. Some of this stuff doesn't exist on public records. You realize what they're moving, right?" Marcus felt his stomach sink. "Weapons?" Mila nodded. "And not just guns. Surveillance rigs, artificial intelligence pattern tracking devices, facial recognition prototypes, stuff the Pentagon doesn't admit they're developing." That's when Marcus realized the truth. Dynex had been hijacked, not by petty criminals or embezzlers, but by a shadow faction, possibly foreign, possibly rogue domestic, who'd used his company's logistics infrastructure to disappear assets no one could trace. And he'd signed the authorizations himself, thinking they were standard supply chain upgrades. That night, he returned to the warehouse, not as Graham, but in a full suit, guarded by 2 armed private security contractors. The moment he stepped inside, everything stopped. Conversations died. Someone dropped a box. Redfield wasn't there. Neither were the 4 men from the van. HR had been wiped clean. His name was no longer in the system. In fact, it looked like Graham never existed. But then a voice came over the intercom. "You should have stayed in the boardroom, Marcus." The doors slammed shut. Every light in the warehouse flickered, then went black. For a few seconds after the warehouse lights died, there was nothing. Just silence, the kind that sits heavy in your chest, forcing you to listen to your own breathing and the distant hum of machines still running somewhere deep in the belly of the building. Marcus didn't move. Neither did his two private security contractors, both frozen, hands resting near their weapons, but not yet drawn. Then came the screech. Metal dragging across concrete, somewhere behind the loading bay. A door? A gate? Maybe a cart being pulled, slowly, deliberately. The sound wasn't accidental. It was a message. Marcus stepped backward toward one of the security guards, whispering, "Fallback protocol!" Secure exit. But even as he said it, he knew there was no exit now. Redfield had locked the place down from somewhere inside. The entire warehouse, 100,000 square feet of shelves and hidden corridors, had become a cage. He'd underestimated them. He thought exposure would be enough, that once he stepped in as himself, with the weight of his position and the evidence from Mila, they'd scatter like roaches. Instead, they were waiting for him, planning for him. One of the guards pulled out a flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, shaky but wide. That's when they saw it, spray-painted on the nearest wall in dripping black letters. "We built this house! You just paid for it!" Mila's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Marcus, the servers are going offline. I'm watching them one by one. Gone. They're wiping everything." Her voice was tight with urgency. "They knew you were coming." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "Get the secondary backups to the cloud. All of it. Already uploading. But if you don't get out in the next 15 minutes, none of it will matter. You'll be gone before the truth gets out." Marcus nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He turned to the guards. "We find Redfield, or whoever's left. We get hard proof on video. Then we get out." The flashlight's beam swept over boxes stacked high, past hanging chains and forklifts parked like sleeping beasts. Then it landed on movement, just for a flash, a figure darting behind a shelf. The guards drew their weapons. Marcus followed, heart pounding. They turned a corner and stopped. The aisle was filled with mannequins. Mannequins wearing Dynex uniforms, lined up like soldiers, their lifeless eyes aimed forward. Each one wore a name tag with a real employee's name, and in the center, hanging from a ceiling pipe, was a single security badge, Redfield's. Suddenly, the PA system kicked on again. A low, distorted voice echoed across the empty space. Not Redfield's. "You never asked where your power came from, Marcus. You just signed checks and smiled for cameras. You let them in." The flashlight flickered. Gunfire. One of the guards dropped, hit from somewhere above. Marcus dropped to the floor, crawling under a conveyor belt. The second guard returned fire toward a shadow on the mezzanine. The bullet struck metal. Sparks flew. Then silence again. Marcus crawled into a maintenance tunnel behind the breaker box. He had passed it as Graham during his fake employment and noticed it wasn't on any official blueprint. Inside, it was tight, walls pressing in, but dry and clean. Someone had used it recently. He moved slowly, one hand dragging the flashlight the surviving guard had tossed him before disappearing into gunfire. The tunnel curved, then dropped. It emptied into a room he didn't recognize, and that scared him more than anything. The room had 4 monitors, all blinking red. Surveillance feeds. One screen showed the warehouse entrance, still locked down. Another showed the cold storage room. The third showed the loading dock. The fourth, the executive boardroom. It was live. Marcus stared at it. Someone was sitting in his chair. Not Redfield, not the CFO. It was someone he didn't recognize. A woman, maybe late 40s. Clean suit, no name tag, face sharp and still. Behind her stood the head of security, Edmonds, who Marcus had thought was on medical leave for back surgery. The woman turned toward the camera, almost as if she knew he was watching. "You weren't supposed to look this close," she said, voice coming through the monitor. Marcus stared. "We needed your infrastructure, your routes, your cloud permissions, that's all. You gave us access when you tried to scale. Global expansion requires global deals, and some of those deals come with shadows attached." Marcus finally found his voice. "You're not with Dynex." "No," she said calmly. "We're what happens when corporations forget who made them successful." She reached under the table and pulled out a silver case, opened it. Inside, an ID badge with Marcus's face, labeled "Former CEO Compromised." "You're not the boss anymore," she said. Marcus backed out of the room. He ran through the tunnel, flashlight swinging. He emerged into the southern wing of the warehouse, near the logistics terminal. Emergency exit. He bolted for the door, but standing in front of it was Redfield. His sunglasses were gone. His eyes were hollow. He looked calm. "You had a good run," he said, stepping forward. "But this company, it was never yours. You were the mask." Marcus didn't wait. He lunged, swinging a broken metal rod he had snatched from the tunnel. It connected with Redfield's arm. The man grunted, stepped back, but didn't fall. He swung back. Marcus ducked, rolled, and slammed his shoulder into the man's gut. They both went down. Redfield pulled a blade. Marcus kicked it away. They struggled, fists pounding, knees slamming into ribs, sweat and blood mixing on the cold warehouse floor. Finally, Marcus locked Redfield in a chokehold, one he'd learned in military school years ago. Redfield went limp. Marcus stood, gasping. Then he turned to the camera above the door and held up Redfield's ID badge. "Try explaining this," he growled. He swiped the badge. The door opened. Sirens. Red and blue lights flooded the air as Marcus stumbled into the dawn light. He collapsed just as agents, real federal agents, swarmed the warehouse. Mila had done it. She'd sent the footage, the evidence, the cloud backups. And someone in Washington had paid attention. As Marcus lay on the sidewalk, breathing hard, Mila appeared beside him, kneeling down. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head. Number not yet. Because even as the agents dragged out Redfield and dozens of others, employees, moles, even senior executives, Marcus knew the woman in the boardroom had vanished. Her name never found. Her voice already scrubbed. And worst of all, the servers she used were beyond government reach. Dynex would recover. The shadow operation had been exposed, but part of the machine was still out there, rebuilding. Somewhere in another company, another country, another name. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood before the press, a microphone in his hand, cameras pointed at his face. "I faked my own identity and worked inside my own company because I sensed something was wrong. What I found was corruption, betrayal, and theft at a level that shocked me. But let me be clear, this is not over. This isn't just about Dynex. This is about the systems we've allowed to grow unchecked, and the people behind them, who still walk free." The crowd erupted. Questions flew. But Marcus walked away, silent. Back in his office, he stared at the screen. One email, untraceable, had arrived that morning. No subject. Just a message. "You're not the only CEO watching from the inside. Don't turn your back again." He closed the laptop slowly, then stood and turned off the lights.